Welcome back, everybody, to day 11, lesson 6.6, multiply and divide rational expressions. I hope you did really well on the last one, which was just a multiplication and a division. We're going to step it up just a little bit today, and we're going to have to be doing some factoring in this lesson. Once again, I only have two examples for you, one multiply, one divide. Let's go ahead and get started. So, example 1. Multiply and express as a simplified rational. State the domain. So we're going to have to make sure we do the domain, but we have to do a couple of things first before we can go ahead and state that domain. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start multiplying. And we got to think about how we multiply. I'm multiplying numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, top times top, bottom times bottom. No fancy crisscrossing. That's for proportions only, and proportions only show up when there's an equal sign in between, and I do not have that. So I have to go ahead and top times top, bottom times bottom. But as I start looking at these, this is factorable. 8 squared minus 4. 4 is a perfect square. It's 2 times 2. This is factorable. A squared minus 1. 1 is a perfect square. 1 times 1 is 1. This is factorable. A plus 1, if I put parentheses around it, it's already a factor. So I don't have to do anything to that. And A plus 2, if I put parentheses around that, it's already a factor, so I don't have to do anything to that as well. So let's go ahead and let's factor first, and then we'll go ahead and multiply. So I know I can take the first numerator, the first top, and I can factor it into an A plus or minus something times an A plus or minus something. So let's go ahead and make our little T-chart. Some of you probably already know what it's going to be. 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. And of course, there's no B term, so it's going to be 0. 1 and 4, well, negative 1 and positive 4 would give me a positive 3. But that's not going to give me 0. I need it to match 0. So I'm going to do negative 2 plus positive 2. There's my 0, and they match. So I'm going to add a minus 2 and a plus 2. How many of you already thought it was going to be a 2 and a 2? Let's go ahead and factor the bottom, the denominator of the first fraction, of the first rational. So I already know it's going to be something A plus or minus something, A plus or minus something. And if you want to, you could pause the video and see if you got it right. But 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, and there's no B term, so it's going to be 0. Well, 1 is just 1 times 1, and the only way I could get a negative is one of them has to be negative, one of them has to be positive, and negative 1 plus positive 1 is, of course, 0. So minus 1 plus 1. And then I have my second rational, which is x plus 1, and I'm going to make those parentheses much more defined, and a plus 2. Okay, I'm now ready to go ahead and multiply. I'm going to go ahead and multiply top times top, numerator times numerator. Now I know you're probably thinking, oh man, miss, that looks tough. No, you don't actually want to multiply. You don't want to actually do any kind of foiling or distributing at all. All you want to do is put them all together as one big numerator. Okay? And then same thing, denominator times denominator, bottom times the bottom. Put it all together as one big denominator, one big bottom. There we go. So it did ask me about the domain, and this is where I'm going to get, ooh, I missed a parentheses there. There we go. This is where I'm going to get anything about undefined, or if they ask about a domain restriction, this is where it's coming from. So I'm going to set each one of those parentheses equal to 0. So I can go right over here. A minus 1 equals 0. A equals positive 1 because I'm adding a 1 to both to each side. A plus 1 equals 0. a equals -1 because I'm subtracting a 1 from each side. And a plus 2 equals 0. A equals -2 because I'm subtracting a 2 from both sides. I'm just cutting down on my work. Okay, so there are my three undefined terms, or my three places in my domain that are restricted. If they ask, I think it's a click down menu. Let's go back and see if we can cancel anything out. Excuse me. So I'm looking for something that's the same on the top and the bottom. Numerator and denominator, it has to be the same. And the first thing that jumps out at me is the 2. I have a +2 in the bottom. I have a +2 in the top. Cancel them out. I cannot cancel a +2 with a -2. It has to be exactly the same inside the parentheses. They are completely gone. Completely gone. There's nothing left at all. No a, no plus, no 2, no parentheses. I think there's one more that I could cancel out. Yep, the a plus 1 and a plus 1. So they are both gone, completely wiped out, top and bottom. And so I'm done with this problem. I have a minus 2 on the top. I like the parentheses, but once again, they're not needed. A minus 1, I like the parentheses, but they are not needed. I think the reason I really like the parentheses is because it reminds me that they go together, a minus 2 and a minus 1, and I can't cancel this out and think about it as -2 divided by -1, and I can't simplify it anymore. So that's why I like the parentheses personally myself. Khan Academy takes both. I think I've done it both ways in Khan Academy. A cannot equal 1, -1, -2. And remember, sometimes these two go together and on Khan Academy as that, plus and minus 1, sometimes. I just wanted to show it just in case Khan Academy does that to you. So there's the multiplication. Not much harder. In fact, I thought that one was pretty easy. I factored, I multiplied. I didn't really multiply. I just made a big numerator and a big denominator. I canceled out. I made sure that even though I canceled out, I took the 2 that I canceled out and they count for my restrictions. And then once I was done, whatever was left is my answer. I don't have to do anything to it. That's the beauty of it. Okay, let's do a divide. And so the instructions are exactly the same. The only difference is it says divide, and then it says, of course, express as a simplified rational, state the domain. Now, for divide, I would go ahead and do the domain right away because the domain is tied to the original problem. The reason I didn't do that until I had factored is because I needed those factors to get me my 2 answers. So in the multiplication, if you can factor first, factor first. But for the division, I would go ahead and I would go straight to the denominator and do our undefined or our domain. Now, if you forget and you do this when you get down to just before you finish simplifying, you should be okay and you should end up with the same answers for your undefined and your restrictions on your domain, because that's what I did before I watched the Khan Academy video, and I ended up with the same restrictions. There are 2 denominators. So I'm just going to go ahead and put both of them equal to 0. So p plus 5 equals 0. I would subtract 5 from both sides, leaving me with minus 5, because 0 minus 5. Then I'm going to take 4p plus 20 and set it equal to 0. Now I'm going to show a little bit more work over here on this one, just because it's a little bit more complicated. So I'm subtracting the 20, leaving me with -20. I'm going to go ahead and divide by 4, and when I divide -20 by +4, I get -5. So both of these denominators are giving me the same answer, the same restriction, so I really only have the one restriction, -5. All right, let's go ahead and start dividing. Remember, the first thing you need to remember when you are doing a division problem is KFC. You want to go and get some chicken. Keep the first fraction. Keep the first rational. Flip the second one. That's what the F stands for. KF, flip. Change the division to multiplication. All right, now we just have to go back through and we have to start multiplying. As we multiply, we're also going to try to factor a little bit. So remember, we're thinking, what can I factor? And then let's go ahead and do our multiplication. So it looks like to me, both numerators can be factored. And it looks like there's one little thing in one of the denominators that I can think about. So let's go ahead and do the first fraction. So the first fraction's numerator, they both have a 2 in common. So let's factor it out. That leaves me with p plus 3. Okay, the bottom is already looks like this p plus 3. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep it p plus 5, but I'm going to add those parentheses to it. Okay. All right. The second numerator, they both have a 4 in common. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out the 4, p plus 5. And then 10, although 10 is a constant, I can also think of 10 as its factors. It's 1 times 10. Well, that doesn't do me much good, but it's also 2 times 5. And I think that might come in handy when I multiply, especially for canceling purposes. Okay, so now that I've gone ahead and factored, I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I multiply numerator times numerator, top times top. I'm going to go ahead and constant times constant, and then parenthesis times parenthesis. Remember, you don't want to actually do the foiling unless you are asked to. But for most part, I would leave it like this because I think it's going to cancel. I want to bring the two factors first because I always want my coefficients in front of my my variable. So I want to bring the 2 times 5. I just kind of want to switch these two places. That's all. And then p plus 5. We've already taken care of our undefined and our domain, but if you get to this point and you have to do, and you do the domain from here, you're going to end up with the same thing. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 cannot equal 0, so you're okay with that. And p plus 5, we end up with this guy right here. So we're okay and we end up with the same thing. So it doesn't really matter when you do it. If you forget to do it in the beginning, it's okay. Do it now. You'll get the same answer. All right, let's go ahead and cancel. And you probably already noticed that there's p plus 5, so goodbye. But did you also notice that there's a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom? They would cancel each other out as well. So I have my answer. 4, p plus 3. No, you do not have to distribute the 4. I promise you, you can leave it just like that, divided by 5. There's your simplification. P does not equal negative 5. We're going to kick it up another notch next week to the advanced stage where we're going to be doing some more factoring. See you guys next week.